Yeah, that's last called Cafe Alto. Incidentally, Richard would never forgive the artist that we hired to do this project, because if you look at the way the saxophonist is holding his saxophone, it is impossible to play saxophone holding a saxophone that way. And so he was cursing. I said, look, forget it. It's done already. And so, you know, that was our first project. Richard and I then created the MFT Productions, that is called Music That Fits. And after reasonable acclaim, critical acclaim for our CD, we collaborated on two similar projects involving many fine jazz musicians, but featuring the great trumpet player and flugelhorn player Guido Basso and the wonderful Dave Turner on alto sax. These were Midnight Martini, okay, which Richard got a big kick of this nice comic rendition of the artists, and Dedications. By the way, just for those who are interested, the person who did the art work, we always used to like combining people together. She was a psychoanalyst in Toronto named Mary Wright, who loved doing jazz art, and we got her to do this. And yes, you can see, these are dedications to all sorts of musicians that we knew. We even had a friend of Guido who had just passed away, and we dedicated a tune to him. Okay. Okay, let me see. After about 3 years ago, and I have to tell you at the beginning, Richard did not think I played well enough. And he was probably right. So he didn't want to play with me. And so I, in my own way, kept on studying and working, and I got better and all that type of stuff. So it got to the point, oh yeah, by the way, I'm not finished here. Well, like bragging a bit. These albums were distributed by Canada's premier jazz label, Just in Time Records, and Richard derived great pride from these collaborations and often spoke about these recordings at our lunches. He would always keep saying, gee, Steve, this stuff is so good, and there are lots of stuff out there is such crap. Okay, yeah. Okay, about 3 years ago, I took a risk and I asked Richard to join the Claremont Standards Band. Which you heard earlier, and we had the pleasure of entertaining the Canadian Psychoanalytic Society at our 50th anniversary celebration at Mont Tremblant. Later that summer, the band played at Upstairs Jazz Club. If you can. Unfortunately, Richard's name is not on this, and I blame my good friend Dan Eastcott, who forgot to put Richard's name on this album, but he played on this album, and we had a ball. We absolutely packed the place. The Upstairs Jazz Club, we had about 70 people in. Most of them we brought in by ourselves, and the infamous owner of the club didn't agree that we had as many people as we thought, and he didn't give us quite the money we wanted. But that's a whole other story that you can hear from many a jazz musician here in Montreal. Okay. Finally, in 2008, I asked Richard to join me on a CD which featured a suite of music that I had written in the honor of the Canadian Psychoanalytic Society's 50th anniversary, appropriately entitled The 50 Suite. I believe on this album, one gets an opportunity to hear Richard's playing at its best, both on tenor saxophone and on clarinet. I have to tell you, Richard's done all kinds of playing all over the place, but he didn't record much. And I had to drag him into the studio to do this because I needed a second horn on my album. This album is called Mosley. If you want to know who Mosley is Walter Mosley, a very fine detective story writer who I absolutely love this guy's writing, and I dedicated a tune to him, Mosley. I want to add that if Richard were here right now, he would be urging me to push the music. Richard had our first 3 albums listed on the eMusic website where every tune can be purchased. The last CD, the Mosley, can be purchased through our secretary, Kathy Tsagaroulis, of the psychology department, and all purchases will go to the donation fund that has been set up in Richard's name. So I thank you, Richard, for reminding me that I should do this, because Richard would not. There were times when Richard and I were at the beginning of our career where we would literally be walking around with CDs in our pocket, and we'd walk into stores and we'd hear somebody talk about music and we'd whip the CD out, and this is fine, it's Christmas time, it's jazz, you want to buy some jazz, we'll sell it to you right on the spot. And, so we really, we had a good time in that. In closing, the departure of my good friend Richard has left a hole in my life that will not be easy to fill. When you deal with somebody on a musical level, and Richard was dead serious about music, so am I. And, you don't meet too many people in your lifetime who have that level of commitment and who have very similar types of musical tastes. Although I took Richard out a couple of months ago to see a very well-known saxophone player named Chris Potter. Most musicians here in the audience will know who Chris is. And we went out for supper afterwards, and Richard turned to me and said, "Oh, by the way, Steve, thanks for the invitation, but you know I don't like the way Chris Potter plays." And that was a typical type of Richard type thing. And I said, "Well, Richard, I'm sorry, everybody else does." Okay. As well, Richard was aware that when musicians pass on, there are always dedications written in their memory. We used to talk about Charles Mingus' composition, "Goodbye Pork Pie Hat," which he wrote upon learning that the great tenor saxophonist Lester Young had just passed away. Our band would like to conclude the proceedings this evening with a composition by Kenny Garrett that he wrote upon learning that his longtime musical mentor, Miles Davis, had just died. This is entitled "Before It Is Time to Say Goodbye," and we would like to dedicate this to Richard's memory.